Yeah.
Welcome back to another COVID lockdown. Here we are, COVID lockdown number 4. Who would ever have thunk it? Here we go again. Cooking from home with Jackie on camera.
Hello.
Cat's in his bed for a change. He's not hanging around even though there is chicken on the counter, would you believe? What we're doing today is firstly, we're starting this little program again. We'll do get a couple in the can, just depending on how many weeks this lockdown's running for. But today we're doing a really simple but very, very nice little recipe. It's actually a Jamie Oliver recipe. It's called Flaky Pastry Pesto Chicken. Simply a piece of chicken wrapped in pastry, which is a fantastic idea because it keeps, we're using chicken breast, which I've trimmed up very nicely. We're using chicken breast. The pastry helps to keep the chicken moist, and we're putting a pesto over the top of the chicken, and it just keeps the moisture in the chicken instead of the breast drying out. So let's get started. I've got the oven preheated, running, the recipe says about 220, but I've got an extremely efficient oven, so just check this relative to your oven efficiency, and I've already almost burnt one trialing this. So I've taken my oven down to about 200 degrees for 20 minutes. It'll cook this pastry out very nicely, and it's enough to cook the chicken through. It works out very well. So what we're going to do, got a nice flat baking tray, put a little bit of water in that, a few splotches, helps to stick the paper down. Beautiful. Now, these chicken breasts, as you know, chicken breasts these days are enormous, and I've just cleaned them up, trimmed all the little bits of sinew and fat off it, and cut this bit off it. And it was originally about 300 grams, and I've taken it down to about 200 grams, which is more of a human size instead of these. You get chicken breasts these days that are up to about 500 grams, which is just ludicrous. Now, the way these are shaped, thicker in the middle, thinner on the end, we don't want that. So what we do, you can use a rolling pin or whatever you want. You just, with your knuckles, just punch it down a bit. Tenderizer. And that's flattened it down to approximately the same thickness all the way. Do it on this one too. Just to keep a fairly even cook throughout the piece of chicken. As these cook, they will still seize up, so don't worry about that. Just make sure it's not stuck on there. All right. And our little fella here, we'll do something with that in a minute too. Just with your fist. Good. Now, I'll quickly wash my hands. There will be a lot of hand washing during this dish because we're playing with raw chicken, so just be careful of that. I've let the chicken sit out of the fridge for about 15 minutes to come down to room temperature. You don't want to leave it out too much longer than that because of bacteria, etc. Now what we're going to do is we're going to season up our pieces of chicken. Give them a good seasoning, salt and pepper. Okay. And it's called pesto, Flaky Pastry Pesto Chicken. By the way, we're using puff pastry for this recipe, and the puff pastry has been out of the freezer for about 20 minutes to soften. Now what we're going to do, just get a nice big heaped teaspoon of pesto. This is just a basic shop bought pesto. If you're into making your own, they're beautiful. Yeah, homemade pestos are so much better than a shop bought pesto. But for ease of this whole thing, here we go. Shop bought pesto, whack it over the top. This is as difficult as this recipe becomes. Now, I was thinking while we're doing that, another teaspoon, right there. Why just confine it to basil pesto, which that is basil and cashew and or possibly has pine nuts or cashews. All these ones now, all these groovy ones, they do have cashew or whatever in them. This is just a different style of a pesto. This is roast tomato, feta, basil and cashew. So why don't we try one of that? And you can get in and try whatever you like on these things. Let me tell you, it just works. The basil pesto itself is just gives it a fantastic flavour. But try anything you like on it. We can take this one step up from the Jamie Oliver version, and here we go. What would we like this other little one is, Jack? Basil or the roast tomato?
Basil.
Oh, damn it. I was going to go the other one. Okay, put this one in there too. Now, I might keep that out for the moment because you'll see in a minute why. Okay. Plenty of basil on there. Just quickly wash my hands. And once again, just as a why the hell not, we'll take this one step up from Jamie Oliver's one. Let's put some extra parmesan in there. Can't hoit. We'll be fighting over these later, Jackie. But by the way, you'll notice we're doing this video under lights. It's evening. This is going to be our dinner tonight. Excellent. I've got a good little idea for this little one here. So something completely different coming up in this one. Now, what we're going to do, excuse me, get our pastry. This pastry's been sitting out, you can see it's gone nice and floppy. Don't want to leave it out too long. I hope I haven't left it too long because it becomes difficult to get off the paper, off the blue paper. Now we just cut this down the center. Make sure it's separated. Now Jamie's way of doing this is cutting it into strips and wrapping it around, overlapping and wrapping them around, which I'll show you what I mean. He says cut it into 8 strips. There's just way too much mucking around. And what he does is, this is starting to get quite soft now. 1. Overlap each piece. I'm actually using more pastry than what he recommended in his recipe because I think he was using smaller breasts. But actually, yeah, 120 gram chicken breasts. I don't think you can even find 120 gram chicken breasts in Australia anymore. They're all these monster things. As I said, this was about 300 originally. Now what you do is you just tuck the edges underneath. Remembering the chicken will still seize up. When it cooks, it will still seize up. But it's puff pastry. We don't mind if there's a bit of extra puff pastry. Yum. The other way you could do this is, I reckon you could not bother about that. Let's try one without all the fancy overlapping stuff going on. What do you reckon, Jackie? Let's. I reckon just try one like this. Tuck it underneath. And let me tell you, just for a starter, that's a lot easier. Oh, it's a bit of a coffin, doesn't it? It's much easier doing it that way than all the individual folding underneath bits on that. So that's a bit faster for a start. Now I've got some pancetta left over from a different recipe we're doing. And I thought we'll wrap on in pancetta. That'll do. fold it over slightly. Try and get it away from that because that will puff a little bit. Not hugely, but it will puff a little bit. Wash my hands, excuse me. Now, we just take a little bit of olive oil and brush our pastry down with olive oil. And really, that's just as difficult as this dish is. You can have it, the chicken takes 5 minutes to trim up and prepare. Get a little bit more olive oil in there. If you get your, just remember with your pastry, just give it about 15 to 20 minutes to thaw so that you can use it. Now what we're going to do also, as you'll see in the recipe, we'll chuck in some cherry tomatoes. Jamie says get your cherry tomatoes on the vine. Well, I couldn't find any on the vine. I'm lucky to find anything the way the lockdown has happened and things are disappearing from the shelves again. Okay. That's as difficult as it is. Let's just for decoration. That's all we're going to do for this part of it. We'll pop that in the oven for about 20 minutes it'll take. Keep an eye on it relative to your own oven. So just make sure you don't burn your pastry. 20 minutes should be the minimum, I guess. Yeah, make sure you don't burn it, but we do have to cook that chicken through. So get it in and we'll see you back here in 20 minutes or so. Okay, here we are back again. Our chicken has just completed about 20 minutes in the oven. Oh, look at that. Wow. You can take your pick as to which one you prefer. Do we like the stripy one or the slab?
I think the stripy one.
It does look a bit pretty, doesn't it? Okay, that's what we'll go with. That's the basil pesto. This is the roast tomato style pesto thing. So let's get him out. Oh, now one thing. Be very, very careful. As we found earlier, I just chucked a few of those pieces of pancetta into the recipe. Be very, very careful. These, because the pastry wrap on it really holds the heat in, and I test ran one of these a little bit earlier today and burnt the palate. I was too eager to get into it. I was actually test ran one with this roast tomato style thing. I said, try some of these other ones. It was absolutely yum. Now here's our little one wrapped in the pancetta, which should be rather interesting too. Let's try and get this out. I realised I did make a little bit of a mistake by putting the tomatoes in the same tray. The tomatoes actually should have been in a different tray because so much liquid has come out. The edges of the pastry has gone a little bit soggy. But main thing is, the top is crispy and, hear that? Mm-mm. Now, shall I attempt to cut one and show you? Beautiful. Chicken cooked and so juicy in there. Another thing, by the way, don't skimp on that layer of pesto you put over the top, because that's all the flavour in it, and that flavour will seep down into the chicken all around it. That is actually the whole basis of the flavour. If 1 teaspoon, as I said, 1 teaspoon relative to a small Jamie Oliver breast, the 120 gram breast, these are bigger, so use as much as you like and get a good coverage before you wrap your pastry over the top. What I'm going to quickly do here, get a couple of blistered tomatoes. Beautiful. In the meantime, we quickly steamed up some, recipe says beans, but I had some lovely broccolini. Look at that. Beautiful. Okay, I warmed the plates also, so they're a bit warm. Here we go. Jamie Oliver's. Here we go. Jamie Oliver's Flaky Pastry Pesto chicken, and a little bit of a side. In this case, broccolini, not beans, and roasted tomatoes. And we can recommend this dish. We've tried it. It's absolutely beautiful. So simple. Only takes 10 minutes to get it in the oven, 20 minutes oven time. Beautiful dish. Give it a go.